Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Azure Administrator Study Series. Hope you guys have had a wonderful day and happy to join us in the session. So, Sir David, I hope you had a wonderful day as well.
Hello, sir. Busy day. How I'm just breathing up and down. It's been absolutely crazy. How about you? How's it going?
Yeah, it was quite a bit busy, but manageable.
Yeah, nice. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. So it's really appreciated. So one of the things that we've not really been doing like much lately, Sakofi, is encouraging. We've not been encouraging people to join our different channels, subscribe to our channels, make
Oh,
sure that
yeah,
they like like the videos also. So what I'll do is let me go ahead and share my
definitely.
screen. So on the screen, ladies and gentlemen, on the screen we'll have sort of like the shortened URLs, different social media handles. So not just social media handles. For example, we have the link to our meetup group. So that's where we announce, we make the announcement for the different live study sessions that we're having. So we're currently going through the series on Azure Solutions Architect. We have other series that we're going to be going through based on people's vote. But if you want to be notified when we're putting together those types of sessions, make sure that you join the meetup group. So we also have a YouTube channel. So we're actually working on another YouTube channel, which would be like the main Azure Hangout certification live study YouTube channel. But we'll let you know about that once it's ready. So just be sure to follow us on our YouTube channel, and then you'll be able to get the updates. Oh, I just said I wanted to throw that one in today, Fakofi.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's good for these things to be known because that's the way people can see what's going on and easy to get all the updates that you need.
Yep. Okay, so today, what are we going to be doing today? We're going to actually, we have, I believe that I have the session plan here. So here is the plan for what we're doing with the Azure Solutions Architect live study session. So last week we started talking about designing for authentication and authorization, so part one and part two. And this week we're going to look at designing Azure governance solutions. We're going to look at part one and part two of that. So, and we mentioned this last week that the sort of topics that we're going to, they are aligned with the Microsoft Azure Solutions Architect certification exam. So what I'll do is I'll also bring up on the screen so you see sort of like what the outline and the objectives for the certification exam is about. So if you have a look at this, you can see the different aspects that we're going to be tested. So this is for the AZ304. So there are two exams. There's the AZ303, there's the AZ304. So if I go to open up the document that shows what the objectives are, you can see that there was a recent update on July 26th to this exam. However, if you have a look at this, I believe that this is a consolidated version of the Azure Solutions Architect exam. So actually, let me go back to AZ303. Let me bring up AZ303 and just bring that up very quickly to show the consolidated view of the objectives. So this is AZ303. So you see that there's information about monitoring costs, and we're going to be going through some of that. There's information that we're going to be looking at today around governance, which we'll find under this section of implementing and managing governance solutions. There's information that we're going to find under the AZ304 section, which will be information around designing for governance. So I'm just scrolling through very quickly here. So if I scroll up a little bit, much more slowly, you see that here, this is stuff like the implementing governance solution. And then AZ304, you have the information about the designing governance solution that you're going to see in this particular certification. So if I scroll up here, you see like information about designing for governance around here. So that's the plan, Takofi. So that's what we're going to be going through today.
All right, definitely looking forward to it. I hope all the guys are.
Yeah. Okay.
And in
So let
regards to the labs as well, definitely we're going to put some labs together for the one we did last week and also this week as well. So just bear with us.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So what we're going to start with is let's first of all design. When we say governance, let's make sure that we're clear what exactly we're talking about because it's very important, right? So that we have like a clear definition of what we're talking about. So Sakofi, let me throw this question to you. So you're a very experienced IT person, right? You're not only a very experienced IT person, you're also a very rich man. You know, you run your own businesses, you do a bunch of stuff. So of course, you're a very intelligent man, right? And you have a lovely family also. So, how would you define governance?
Well,
So
the way I'll define governance, I'll think about it this way. I mean,
yeah.
when we talk about governance, most often you have to think about the various country we live in, countries. So
Mm,
where we have government, right?
mm,
Government, what exactly do they do? They have probably set of rules or policies or maybe principles that they have to adhere to, or maybe make sure that the people actually adhere to those principles and rules. I think the same thing applies to it when we come to the cloud. The governance will be a set of rules, principles that, and also policies that your users have to obviously follow or obey, and you have to enforce it using these government governance set type of services that obviously you're going to go through with us.
awesome. And I think that you're absolutely right. So when you mentioned we have to look at government, I was tempted to say it depends on which government you're looking at, bro.
Exactly. It's quite true though, because there'll be for every any company that move the cloud, there will be people that apply the government in the right way and others that will use in the corrupt way. So
Yeah, there will be some that will have like their cloud that will have like very, very fat neck and big bellies.
exactly, and realize that they're not really doing what they're supposed to be doing.
So I'm not sure where this conversation is going to, but I think before we say something, so yeah, so I agree with Sakofi. So in terms of governance, if we think about it in terms of government, right, we want to make sure that we apply policies, right, in our cloud environment and the policies will define what can be done in what way that we want things to be done in our environment. So governance is what how we enforce. So governance is how we enforce standards in our cloud environment. So, and those standards could be standards that's been defined by maybe legal standards. So maybe your organization is part of an industry. Maybe you're part of the health industry, and you're part of the, a government organization, right? You have certain legal standards that you have to adhere to, right? Some of them may be just down to maybe cost, just cost. Saving standard or something like that. So cost savings. Some of them may just be down to just security best practices, right? Just security best practices in terms of this is how to do things to make sure that we're not introducing new risk into our environment. But governance is how we enforce standards in our cloud environment. And today we're going to look at how to design for governance in Azure. So we're going to start with the number one reason why cloud projects fail today. And we're going to start and then take it from there. Sakofi, what do you think? What do you think is the number one reason why cloud projects fail?
Well, I think it might be cost. Sometimes uh, you don't manage your resource well, more likely you will uh, go out of order in
Yeah,
terms of how much it costs there.
yeah. And you're absolutely right on that. So cost is the number one reason why a lot of cloud projects fail. Because what happens, Kofi, is that for many organizations, they've been sold this dream that all you need to do is to migrate your resources to the cloud. And when you migrate your resources to the cloud, you get this significant cost savings. Your life will be significantly better. Everybody will be happier, and you won't have any other issues, right? And then what happens with many organizations is that they begin to migrate their resources to the cloud. Then after the first month, they get the bill. And once they get the bill, they go, oh my God, this is not what I expected. Then they begin to migrate back from the cloud back to on premises. So, cost is one of the top reasons why cloud projects fail. So, we're going to start with that today. So, we're going to start by looking at how do we govern cost. So, how do we costs? Govern costs in Azure environment. It's what we're going to start with first of all today, Sir Kofi. So let's start with this premise on how do we govern cost in our Azure environment. So the first thing that we're going to mention about that is this, Sir Kofi, is that when we talk about the goal, the objective of what we're trying to achieve, what's the objective? The objective here is that we want to make sure that we have clarity. So, okay, sorry, apologies. Let me remove the that. So the objectives. So number one, we want to have clarity regarding spending. So we want to know who is spending what. That's very important, right? So governance always starts with visibility. Like what Sarkozy said, if you look at take governance the same way we look at government, like maybe local government, state government, national government, the first place that you want to start with visibility. That's why you say that data is very important to them, right? They're like, what exactly is going on? So maybe they want to improve mortality rate for maybe child mortality rate. Okay, what's the current mortality rate, right? Is there like a particular aspect of the maybe country where there's a lot of mortality than the other aspect of the country? What's the reason behind that? So they want to find out first of all what is going on. So we want clarity regarding our current spending. So that's very important. Who is spending what? What are they spending? What are we spending a lot of our money on? So that's very, very important to us. So we want to get clarity, and that will help us to understand our spending. And number two thing that we want to do is that we want to be able to control the costs, right? And then number three is we want to be able to enable accountability around spending, right? So that's very important, Sakofi, right? We don't want like some type of government, like what Sakofi said, where where money goes missing. I won't mention the name of the country, but there was like a country. There's like this mysterious country, Sakofi, where apparently there was a snake that swallowed millions of dollars. So we want real accountability. We don't want to get things like how much did we spend on Azure this month? We spent £10,000. Where did it go to? Well, there was a snake that that took that. So we want to enable accountability around spending in our organization. So here are the objectives that we're trying to achieve around this. But in order for us to be able to achieve this, let's try to understand what causes a lot of cloud cost issues in many organizations. So here's what we'll start. So when we talk about clarity regarding spending, so let's start with that first. So clarity regarding spending. The number one thing to know about this is that, so let's expand that. So the number one thing to know about it is that a lot of cost issues, sorry, let me remove the underline and it's a bit, yeah. So a lot of cost issues in Azure is not about pricing. A lot of cost issues is about behavior, practices, and processes. Sometimes as technology people, Sarkozy, sometimes we can make things very simple, right? We're just looking at the surface and we're looking at, oh, maybe it's because things are more expensive in Azure and all that stuff. But actually, if you look at the analysis, the data shows that a lot of cost issues that people have in Azure is not necessarily about pricing. It's about the behavior. It's about the practices, about the processes that they have put in place in their organizations. So I remember giving you like a story of this some time ago. Yeah, exactly. Before any smart snake will come to eat your subscriptions. That's true. So, so if you look at it, Sakofi, I gave you a story of that, like the last time I remember, where I said there was this Microsoft exec that said, okay, um, he was having a look at their Azure subscription one day. And as he was having a look at the Azure subscription, Sakofi, he saw this massive database that was deployed into the Azure subscription. So this massive database. That massive database, Sakofi, cost tens of thousands of dollars, I believe. I can't remember correctly, but I believe per week. Right? So they have this massive database that's costing tens of thousands of dollars per week. And he thought, wow, this is interesting. I'm the team leader. And I didn't know that we have this sort of database in our subscription. Let's have a look and see what are we hosting that's costing tens of thousands of dollars per month. Jumped on the database because he has the authorization to do so. Jumped on the database, also on database server, and had a look, and it was empty, completely empty, nothing there. What's going on? Tens of thousands, there's nothing there. Had a look under activity logs. We'll talk about monitoring data in the series. So activity logs is what logs management operations in Azure. Who did this activity? Who deleted that? Who created that? Who modified that? So all of that is logged in activity log in Azure. So this guy had a look in the activity logs and found the engineer that created that database server and went to speak to the engineer and went, hey, I found out that there's this database that we're running that costing tens of thousands of dollars. But I found out that it was empty. What's going on there? And you know what the engineer said, Sakofi? Here's what the engineer said. The engineer said, oh, yeah, that's true. We have this project that will start in about 3 weeks' time. I thought, why do we have to wait? Let's get things going. Let's get started. Let's get moving. So I thought, let me create this database in preparation for what will start in 3 weeks' time. Now, that is normal behavior on premises, right, Sakofi? That's
right.
normal. That's normal because you've already paid for the hardware. It belongs to you, right? So you're like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. However,
Time is money.
exactly. But in the cloud, if you do that in the cloud, you carry that same behavior and that same practice with you in the cloud, you get yourself into a lot of cost trouble, into a lot of
Resources
issues.
money.
So you get yourself into a lot of
In the cloud, right? The resource deployment is money.
issues.
On
Exactly.
on premises, time is money. You don't want to waste time.
Like somebody should tweet that out. That's Sarkovy's wisdom for you. I tell you, this man is very wise. So, how can we control that? How can we really control like that sort of stuff where things are going out of control and stuff like that? So we'll look at that today. So, but we said we're going to start first with. Let's start first with clarity regarding spending, then we go to cost control, and then we go to accountability and stuff. When it comes to clarity regarding spending in Azure, there are certain tools that we can use to gain clarity. One of the tools that we can use to gain clarity is to make sure that we have tagging. So enforce tagging in your organization. So that's important. So why do we want to enforce tagging? Because tagging can help us to gain visibility. That's what tagging can help us to do. So tagging is very important when we talk about cloud governance. What is tagging? What tagging means is we're adding information, adding metadata information to cloud resources that we create. That's what tagging means. So we want to enforce tagging, and enforcing tagging means that we want to add metadata information to cloud resources that we create. What is metadata? Metadata means information about something. That's what metadata means. So what that means is that we want to add accompanying information about the resources that we are creating. So for example, we want to make sure that we enforce tagging regarding things like cost center within our organization, right? So maybe things like cost center, maybe enforce tagging on things like the environment that this belongs to. So cost center will be maybe based on your department within the business. Environment will be maybe based on something is production environment, something is dev environment, something is QA. So for example, if I have a database that's consuming tens of thousands of pounds and it's development environment, I may want to query that a bit further and other stuff. So tagging is very important. in order to be able to gain clarity regarding spending within our organization. So that's very important. So let's just quickly go have a look. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but let's quickly go have a look at tagging and using tagging in Azure. So what I'll do over here is I'll bring up the Azure portal very, very quickly. And then go.
Yeah, in my department, if you deploy anything in cloud, you have to include the name, the email address as well, just in case they want you to contact you personally, and then obviously discipline you if you are missing.
Yeah, is that enforced that if you do not have it, it's not going to allow you to create it?
It's not. It's not
It's not
enforced.
enforced. It's advisory, right? So it's just advised to do so, but if you don't do so, it's not as if it's enforced like that.
That's right.
Yeah. So what we'll do here is we'll show like how to use that, but also how to enforce it. So if we want to use tagging, so whenever I'm creating any resource in Azure, so let's say I want to go spin up an Ubuntu server in Azure or any other resource. Come on, don't be slow. So I won't spend a lot of time on this because I don't want this to take too much time. Come on. Why is it taking a while to load? Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to put that in the resource group, specify dev VM, and I'm just going to go to leave everything. I'm just going to go to next, and when I get to tags in a minute, I'll just go next. And then when I get to tags, I can add key value PS within for my resources that as I'm creating my resources. So what you see that is that by default, it's suggesting some name values for me, and then I can specify values. So things like who's the owner, which department does it belong to? So maybe things like the cost center, for example, right?
So are these things you've used in the past, or these are things that are just
So
useful?
it suggests some. So it's going to suggest some to you, right? So in terms of best practices, it's going to suggest certain values to you. So for example, it's suggesting values to me like display name, department, and all that stuff. Also, once I create a particular name value pair, it's going to begin to suggest that name to me also. Yeah. So, but let's say I go cost center and I say 11111, and I say environment. In terms of the environment that this belongs to, is this production, is this development? You can say production environment, and then I can go to create this resource, and then it's going to create the resource with that information that accompanies it. The good thing about it is that we can then use tags when we're doing visibility of cost. So I'll show you an example of how to do that. So if I click on create there, so it's going to go ahead and create that resource. So download the keep here locally. So that's fine. So while it's creating that resource, what I'm going to do is that, so I've downloaded the keep here. Let's return to create the resource. So I'm going to go over to my Azure subscription here, Sakofi, and then I'll show you like where tagging can be used to help us to gain visibility. So for example, if I go over to my Azure subscription, and under my Azure subscription, I'm going to find information on, if I scroll down on the left-hand side, so there'll be information on, so that's not, let's go to, let me go over here. Let me go to this. Let's go to costs, management, and billing. So let me go to cost management and billing. And under cost management and billing, it's going to come up with billing scopes and all the other stuff. If I go under cost management, so cost management is going to bring up information. And one of the information that is going to bring up is ability to do cost analysis. So if I go ahead and I cancel that, so it's giving me the scope that I'm currently on. So actually, you know what? Let me go to cost analysis. Let me see if that scope is supported for the subscription type. So if it's not supported, I'll switch to a different scope because not all subscriptions currently support cost management too. So let me see if my current subscription does. No, so I don't believe it does. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to switch it to a different management group where I have some subscriptions that do. So let's change that. Let's change that scope to a different, let's change it to that. And let's just select that scope and let's see what cost analysis brings up. Come
So
on,
aside
come
from
on.
tagging, can we use, let's say, a resource group to also,
Yeah,
for example, check the cost of a specific resource group?
yes. So we can definitely use resource group to filter things down if we wanted to. So yes, we can do that. So let's go ahead and click on that.
Okay, while this one is coming out, let me just bring up this question.
Okay.
Opinion says, is there any specific rules regarding to tagging of our resource?
So what do you mean by specific rules? Opeyemi.
Probably maybe in regards to maybe tagging the resource group. Is that what you're referring to? Okay.
So let me go to bring up. So while Opeyemi is giving some more clarification on that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go do some cost analysis. So if I go to start to have a look at my environment over here, and I'm beginning to go to cost analysis. I'm beginning to look at that. I can use tagging information to specify and say, show me the spending for resources that have this particular tag. So that's what that allows me to be able to do. So I can go to add a filter, and you can see that one of the filter that I can use is a tag. So I can
Can
go
you use
specify.
multiple filters?
Oh, sorry, what did you say?
Can you use multiple filters? So, for example, a filter for a resource group at the same time, you want to narrow it down to a resource group with, object with specific tags.
Yes, so we can do that. So I can add like a filter. So let's say I had a filter to say, show me a filter for, let's say, resource type, for example, is one. So maybe I can say, show me for resource type that is maybe for virtual machine disks and any virtual machine disk costs. I can then add additional filter that I say, show me virtual machine disk that have this tag associated with it,
All
right?
right.
And then I can filter it by tag. So that can help me to now gain granular visibility to see what exactly is this department spending and what resource types are they spending the money on, because I can really begin to
Yeah.
drill down to see exactly what they're spending the money on. So that is on the part of the helping me to get visibility. But if I wanted to enforce this, I can use Azure Policy to enforce that, to enforce tagging, for example, right? And there are two ways to do that with Azure Policy. So the first way is probably not scalable enough. So the first way is if Sarkovi tries to deploy a resource and you're not adding the tags that I'm requiring in the organization, we're going to block you from creating that resource, right? So that is one way. Another way is to say if Sarkovi tries to deploy a resource and Sarkovi's resource that you're trying to deploy doesn't have the tags that I need it to have, I can look within the environment that you're trying to deploy to and I can inherit certain tags from that, right?
Okay.
So that allows it to be much more scalable. So, your developers wants to be able to deploy without hindrance. So what you're doing there is if I go on the policy definitions and I show you some of those built-in policy definitions that has to do with tags. So if I filter just by
The other one
policy,
more like append certain things to wherever you're creating.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So let's go to expand that. So you can see like there are different versions of this, and this is very important to know what this is talking about. So I won't go through all of them, but I just want to show you an example of them. So for example, require a tag and its value on resources, right? So what this one is talking about is it's going to, so for example, if I go to assign that, you see that I'll need to provide the scope that I'm assigning this to. So let's say I'm assigning it to that management group. And I'm going to go to next. And parameter, you can see that here I have to specify a tag name and a tag value. In other words, what I'm saying is you have to provide exactly this tag name and this tag value when you're deploying your resources, right? So this one is really helpful if you want to ensure that, so for example, resources that are deployed into a particular subscription or into a particular resource group have a particular tag associated with them, right? So, but this one, you're not giving flexibility. You're essentially saying you have to give me exactly this name and exactly this value. So that is what that is saying, right? Give me this name and give me this value for you to be able to proceed, right? So this one append a tags and its value is one of the other options that I mentioned. So if you're trying to deploy a resource and the resource that you're trying to deploy does not have the particular tag required, it's going to append it for you, right? So, for example, I can say if you're deploying into a resource group called resource group one, any resource deployed into that resource group automatically gets a tag of name or department, finance, and something like that. If that makes sense, right? Yeah. So essentially, there are different options that you have in terms of how to do that. So require a tag on resources gives more flexibility. So with things like require a tag on resources, what you're going to say is that I want you to make sure you provide this tag. However, I'm giving you flexibility as to the value that you provide, right? You can use certain options to limit the values that people can enter, but essentially you're saying provide this tag, but you can put whatever value that you want to put in there. You can put that in there. So that's what that is about.
Okay, before we
So
move on to the next one, let me just bring up a few questions here. So I think OpenUI's question was more like, is there any specific rules that you have to follow when you are creating tags? I mean,
Um, so there are certain recommendations that Microsoft has when it comes to that. Let me see if I have um, that over here. Let me see. So here's some recommendations from Microsoft Opeyemi. So when it comes to cost management or cost governance in Azure, so here's some recommendation of tags from Microsoft. So apologies. Let me go delete that. Let's go bring up a much different bot. Let's give it some space. Let's change the color. Let's put that here. So if you, here are some recommendations that Microsoft has. So for example, um, tags or enforcing tags that has to do with finance code. So something that helps you to know where this charge should go to, so that if you're doing maybe billing in your organization, so enforcing tag that has to do with application context, right? So in terms of application context, maybe things like what's the project of
yeah.
this resource, deployment context. So that is which environment is it? Production environment? Is it development environment? Is it QA environment? Is it testing? Right? So that you can use that, and also in terms of who is accountable. So who is the business owner? Like what Sarkozy said, in that in your organization they'll say you need to put your email and other stuff, right? So the reason for that is they want to know who is accountable for this resource, right? So that's the reason for that. So here are the minimum recommendations that Microsoft has. So hopefully that answers your question, Opayemi.
Okay. Actually, we got one from Vijay. Vijay said, what are the different ways to enforce policy?
So I guess Vijay, you're talking about policy effects there. So that's a very good question because whenever like we're applying like a tagging policy, for example, if I say require a tag on resources, if you have a look at the if you have a look at the policy definition, you notice that it has effects that we can specify. So we have effects like deny. So Azure Policy, I believe, has about 7 different effects that we can apply. So let me quickly explain that to Vijay before I move on. So Vijay, let me go to bring up my screen to help you understand policy effect. I have a slide on that, on Azure Policy effects. So, okay, here's a slide on that for you, Vijay. So let's go here. So here are the different effects that we have for Azure Policy. So you can see that there is a deny effect. So that's the effects that you have over here. So deny effect over here. And what deny effect will do is that it's only going to affect the creation, the update of resources. So in other words, if you're creating a new resource or you're updating an existing resource that violates that policy, it's going to fail. So that's what deny would do. Notice that deny would not start shutting down or impacting existing applications. However, if you want to modify or update the configuration of that application, then deny effect will apply. If you want to create a new a new resource, then that effect will apply. You have disabled effect. So disabled effect is when you just want to disable a policy. So if I set this to disable, it just means that ignore this policy. So if I go to, because this is a built-in one, if I go to duplicate definition, um, put it in a location, and so that I can modify it. So if I scroll down to where I'm modifying it, if I set that to disable, so what that means is just ignore, just forget it. So that is what disable is for. So let's look at the other effects. So there's the append effect. So the append effect is what you see on the other policy that says append this tag if this tag does not exist. What that means is that if you have a resource that you're creating or updating, and the configuration that the policy requires does not exist, we're going to automatically add it. Right. So for example, so a common example that is given is that maybe like things like cost center. So maybe I have a resource group and I have an Azure policy that has an append effect that says anything deployed into this resource group that doesn't have a tag of cost center, automatically add this cost center tag and this value of 111. So that is append. So it's going to modify the resource that you're attempting to create or that you're attempting to update. So audit or audit if not exist. So what that does is really what the name does. So it's not going to fail anything. It's going to allow everything to go through. It's not going to append anything. However, if the resource is not compliant with your policy, it's going to log an event in Azure Activity Log, right? And if you go under Azure Activity Log, let me bring that up quickly. If you go under Azure Activity Log, you'll be able to filter for that particular category for Azure Policy. So if I go to Azure Monitor over here, Vijay, and then in Azure Monitor, if I go under Activity Log, and if I go to filter for the category of event category, you see that there's a category for policy. So that's, if you filter for that category, it's going to log any policy violations based on the audit effect. It's going to log them into Azure Activity Log in that way. So it's not going to stop them. It's not going to append anything. It's just going to log them in Azure Activity Log. And then you have deploy if not exist. Deploy if not exist takes append to another level. Append just simply appends a configuration. Deploy if not exists is taking that further by saying, here's an Azure HAM template, right? If this condition is not met, I actually want you to go trigger a full Azure HAM template and I want you to go to deploy that. So that is what deploy if not exist does, is to say, let's take that a bit further. Does that answer your question, Vijay? Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense to you, Vijay.
All right, this one will be a quick one. It said, please name an example of tag and name and value. I bet you've been showing examples of this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So very good examples are, so actually, let me go bring up this document. Let me go bring up this sample document for you that will help you to see like examples. So let me scroll over here. So, oh, there is some delivery. I hope my wife can help me with that. So let me go bring up.
CCTV, right?
No.
Or you link it to Google Assistant.
No, not at all. Not everybody's on surface level.
Oh, I thought you and IoT are friends, so you keep missing.
No, I'm trying to learn IoT these days. I tell you, Sakofi, there's a very I told you, like, there's Sam from Ghana that's great at IoT. There's another guy from Nigeria who his name is what's Clement DK. So I was going to get Clement because he needs to sit down. We need to sit down together and figure out the way to do like some Azure IoT live service. So yeah, I'm trying to get more and more into IoT. I have like about 4 or 5 devices that I need to start playing with, but I'll get into that. Yeah. So to answer the question around examples of tagging. So yes, an example of tagging. So for example, maybe you have a tag name of cost center, right? A tag name of maybe disaster recovery, and then you have different values. Sometimes the value is flexible, so maybe something like approval name, right? So essentially, a tag is just key value pair information. But the thing is that you add that information to your resource, and then you can use that information to search the resources, to analyze the resources, to analyze the cost of the resources, and to analyze a lot of things about the resources. But essentially, it helps you to be able to really understand what's going on in your cloud environment. Without tagging, it can be very difficult to understand that, what's going on in the environment. For example, you see a resource, and the resource, maybe you're doing cost analysis, for example, and in your cost analysis, you're seeing a particular resource that's consuming crazy amount of money. And when it's consuming crazy amount of money, you're trying to figure out exactly who created that and all that stuff. Of course, you can go into Azure Activity Log and begin to dig up that information, right? But that's a longer way to do that, right? That's not efficient. So if you have the tags enforced across your organization, all you need to go to do is to go to the value of the maybe the owner tag of that resource, and then you find out who the owner is, and then you can contact them. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So let's move on very, very quickly. Oh, the bell is ringing. I hope that my wife is able to help. I'll just keep listening. I'm looking outside and I can see the van outside, and I know that I hope she can hear the I can hear her footsteps. Awesome. Okay. Let's carry on. Sorry. Where was I? Let me see where we stopped. So we're talking about gaining visibility, and we said tagging is an important thing that we can use for that. Another thing that we can also use for that, which I've also shown you, is that we can enforce tagging, use Azure Policy for this. So you can enforce tagging and then use Azure Policy to enforce tagging within your organization, and then you can help you to gain clarity regarding spending and what's going on within your organization. The next thing, Sakofi, is to control costs. So what do you think we're going to use when we want to control costs within our organization? What do you think? Which technology are we going to use?
For control of cost,
Yeah.
Azure Policy.
Yeah, so it's going to be Azure Policy, but we're going to use another one. So it's going to be Azure Policy plus Azure Costs Management. So these two are what we can use to enforce costs. So let's go to this other aspect. To control cost. So when it comes to controlling costs, right, the first thing that you want to do is that you want to ensure that people cannot deploy crazy sized resources, right? I'll give you an example, Sir Kofi. Just a few moments ago, I created an Ubuntu server, right? If I go create an Ubuntu server again, so let's go do that. So while I'm creating an Ubuntu server, Sir Kofi, I have this option here called size. I can pick the size of this virtual machine. If I go to specify the size of this virtual machine, I can let's do something crazy. So CPU, I'm just going to go say, show me only sizes that has CPU of above 400 CPUs. And I click OK to that. And it says it's not available in my subscription because it's a limited subscription. But if it's an enterprise agreement subscription, that size will probably be available. But if you have a look at that, Sakofi, so I can deploy a virtual machine resource that has 416 CPUs, 11,400 gigs of RAM, right? And that's going to cost me £53,000 per month.
Yeah, that's within your budget.
Sarkozy said that's within my budget. Which I'm not sure which budget is. I'm not sure which budget is that. No, already your budget. I'm not sure. You have the budget of 53,000. So definitely per month, exactly per month. So maybe you don't want people to be able to do this. So what you can
deploy this and wait for 3 weeks for the project to start.
Exactly. So maybe an engineer that's like eager. You saw what happened recently with I won't mention the name of the company, but a company that got hacked and somebody was able to put some malicious software into their code base that went out to a lot of organization. Actually, the company is well known out there. It's SolarWinds, right? SolarWinds breach that happened. Yeah. And you saw what happened. You saw that the event was blamed on an intern. Actually, they're like, oh, we have an intern that made that mistake. It's like, why do you not have policies in place to prevent the intern from doing what the intern did? It's exactly what we're talking about. you need to figure out the guardrails that you need to do. So, for example, if you want to avoid this type of situation, or maybe somebody goes to create a SQL database, right? So, if I go to create Azure SQL database, and when I'm creating the database, you can see I can select ridiculous sizes, Sakofi, when I'm creating Azure SQL. So, that's Azure Platform SQL database. So, let's go back over here. So, SQL. And when I'm creating that, when it gets to the size section and I'm defining the size, I can go crazy and just say, give me ridiculous amount of size. You probably want to be able to limit this. So what you want to do, I just want to show you an example of what that looks like. Very, very quickly. I'm looking at the time here. So let's go to here. And if I go to create SQL database resource, I won't actually create it. I want to go straight to the setting. Where I specify the size. Actually, let's go back. I missed it already. So it's going to be over here. So, okay, I create a new server, blah, blah, blah. SQL admin, give it the password, give it a password, and click OK to that. That's fine. Okay, so SQL server, let's go on. Okay, so I have my server. So if I go to configure the database, you can see that by it's defaulting to like 2 virtual calls. So this is a platform service. Right, so this was one what that engineer did that I was talking to you about. So I can go to like a really crazy stuff, and I can just go to do some crazy stuff. Right, let's make that 14 calls. Let's change that to that. Let's go to 7,000 per month and all that crazy stuff. So we can do that. So, but what we want to do is that we want to use something like Azure Policy again, and in Azure Policy we have certain policies that have to do with sizes. So, for example, if I search for oh, come on, let's go back over here. Let's go filter for SKU, and let's filter for SKU within policies. So this is a bit dragging today. I'm not sure why. So, for example, you can see Sarkofi that we can use these policies that are based on SKUs to limit the sizes that are allowed. So, for example, I can say allowed virtual machine sizes, right, that you're allowed to create. And I can use that to limit what can be done. So I can go over here to use something like allowed virtual machine size, and I can use that to control the size of the virtual machines that you can deploy. So that is how we can use Azure Policy to sort of control cost. But on the other hand, we can also use something like cost management for that. So how do we use cost management for that? Cost management allows us to set what is called budgets. So we can set budgets, right? And
it's really essential, no matter what, to set up budgets because you never know. Right.
yeah, because things can go really crazy, right? And stuff. So what you want to do is that you can set budgets. You can set it at different levels of the management scope. You can set it on the subscription level, on the management group level, right? And when I'm doing budget, it allows me to be able to say this subscription is allowed to spend like £5,000 per month. But then the good thing about budget is that budget allows me to tie in accountability with what I'm doing, right? So because what I can then do is I can say, if this spending gets to 70% of the budget, send an email to Psychophy. Let him know that you're at this level. If it goes beyond that, send an email to maybe the team leader. If it goes beyond that, send an email to the finance team. Right? So essentially, you can add different levels of accountability with budget. So it allows us to be able to tie cost control with accountability. So if I go over to budget on the left hand side over here, Sarkofi. So if I go to add a budget, I'm not going to actually add one, but I just want to show the process of doing that. So I'm doing that in cost management. And then in cost management, what you want to do is that I want to define budget. And I can say maybe this is the IT department production subscription budget. And I can say, is that going to be reset every month, quarterly or yearly? So I can set it to monthly, calendar month. And then I can set a budget amounts of maybe, let's say, like, if I go SAC office budget, for example, SAC office IT team, 100 mil at the minimum. So so we're starting with 100 mil. That's like, yeah, that's too small. 10 mil. Are you kidding? SAC office, those kind of rich men that will go, are you kidding me? Like, are you actually kidding me? You really want to you really want to disturb me over this? So 100 million, and then we can then go to set sort of like alert around that. So that is where budget is important. So we can set alert conditions. So we can say, if the actual budget or the forecasted budget, if the actual budget gets to 70%, I want to send an email to the development team to say, development team, watch what you're using. If it gets to 80%, I want to contact the development team manager, right? And I can put that in there. And then if it gets to 90%, I'm going to be contacting the finance team to say, put a check on these people, check out what they're doing over there. Right. So that's what that allows me to put controls around that. So then essentially this is both control and accountability together. Right. Is what this allows me to put in place in my organization. But this is not enough. So this is where I'm going to end on this particular topic today, and then we can pick up from there tomorrow. Is that we can actually take this further by also implementing optimization. So let me go to make that big. So number 4, we can look for optimization. Essentially, we're gaining clarity or understanding of spending, right? Spending clarity. We're like tagging, cost management, and Azure Policy for that. We're doing cost control, and we're using Azure Policy and cost management budget for that. We're enabling accountability around spending. We're using cost management, budgeting, and Azure Alert for that. And then when it comes to cost optimization, there are different services that we can use in Azure for that. One of the services that we can use that many people know is a service. Sorry, what did you say, Sakofi?
I was just going to say advisor, but I was going to say the policy as well, the Azure policy. Obviously, in terms of that, let's say someone is deploying a resource and then they want to put in 2 CPU. You can obviously have Azure policy to only allow only 1 CPU instead of 2 or something.
Yeah.
Or that will not fall under optimization.
I'll probably put that under cost control. So optimization would be what we've deployed. We want to look for opportunities to save money on what we have deployed. So, okay, we've deployed it now, right? We've put our tagging, we have visibility into that, we've put cost control with budget, we have accountability with alerts. We want to now start looking continuously at what we're deploying, right? Is there any option for us to save any costs? Right. So I want to be doing that continuously. So Azure Advisor mixed together with Azure Monitor, looking at Azure Alerts is very good for that. So Azure Advisor is a tool that essentially the way that somebody put it, which I like the definition, it's like a personalized cloud consultant, right? So that is what Azure Advisor is. So it can give you recommendations on different aspects of your cloud deployment. And one of those aspects of your cloud deployments that I can give you recommendations on is on cost. So for example, if I go under the cost section in Azure Advisor, what you're going to see is that, let me see, is it giving me any recommendation at all? None. So it's not giving me any recommendation. So that means I'm doing well in terms of saving my money. So let me go to postpone and dismiss. Let me see if it's going to give me any information here. So none. So I don't have anyone. But essentially what this is going to do, actually, let me go to the list so that you can see the list of what Azure Advisor can give us recommendations on. And this is where we'll stop for today. So Azure Advisor, what can it give us? Some. So for example, it's going to give us recommendation on virtual machine sizing. So if Azure Advisor notices that, oh, I've deployed a virtual machine, but I'm only using 20% all the time, it's going to say, hey, you can scale this down to a smaller size and you can save some money. right? So you can give recommendations. Or if you notice that you have a SQL database, I notice that you're not really using it that much, right? It's going to give you recommendation on how to resize it and say, hey, you can resize this and save yourself some money. So that is important. So it's going to say you have this IP address that you're paying for, but not attached to any virtual machine. This public IP address, you're paying for it. It's not attached to any virtual machine. You can delete it and save yourself some money. You have this virtual, essentially it's going to give you recommendation on all these different aspects that we have here. So do you have on associated public IP address that you can delete, right? Or maybe you have some data factory pipelines that you can delete, or maybe you have some snapshot for manage this. You get the point, Kofi. So it's going
Yeah.
to give you that recommendation. But the good thing about this is that you can then tie Azure Advisor together with Azure Policy to hold people accountable for that. So, in other words, what I want to do is that if Azure Advisor detects that there's an opportunity to optimize cost, I want a notification to go out to maybe the management um, team of that group so that they're accountable for that. To say, now you own that. Maybe it's going to raise a Jira ticket. Maybe it's going to raise a service desk ticket for them. And now somebody's going to act on that. Because otherwise, what will happen is that you get a lot of recommendations here and no one is looking at it, right? So how do we do that? So what happens is that whenever Azure Advisor detects an opportunity to optimize costs, it's going to create a log event in Azure Activity Log. So that is where it comes. Is if I go under Azure Monitor, and if I go under Azure Monitor under Activity Log, Azure Advisor, whenever it detects opportunity to optimize, it's going to log an event in Activity Log. And let's go to under Activity Log over here. And under Activity Log, if I go to filter for the category, and one of the category that we have over here is a category called recommendation. So that's where you find that. And then you can add an alert on that. So that's how you do that. Okay. So Sakofi, so that's where we'll stop today. I think we went 3 minutes over time.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Sir David. Yeah, we've learned a lot. Opeyemi got a question here. Let me just bring it up on the screen real quick. So he said, does Azure Advisor look into our organization workload to recommend?
No, so Azure Advisor is very limited. But what you must understand also is that it's free. So you don't pay any money for it. So it's free, but it's limited. So Azure Advisor, for example, will only give you recommendations on only these things that you have on this site. So I'll put this in the chat window for you, Apoyemi, so you can have a look at that. But it's only going to give you recommendations only on this topic. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, about 16 recommendations that I can give you when it comes to cost optimization. There are other tools that you can use. So, for example, there is a tool called Clouding that Microsoft has. So, you see that under cost management. So, that is a tool that you can sort of look to leverage and that it can give you something further than what Azure Advisor provides. There are also third party tools that you can look into that can give you recommendations further than the 16 that Azure Advisor provides. However, Azure Advisor is a good way to start because it's free, right? So you don't pay for it. All you need to do is go have a look at the recommendation, create alerts for activity log for the recommendation category so that you get alerted whenever there's an opportunity to save cost. So that's how you do that.
Okay, got another follow-up question here from Semi.
Okay.
He said, after implementing a policy, is there a way to add an exception for a particular resource, maybe for a particular reason?
Yes, so there is. So when you're creating an Azure policy, you always have the option to exclude. By the way, before I go to show you that, you can see that this is clouding that I was talking about. So it's a service that Microsoft bought. Oh, okay. So actually, clouding is retired already. So it's all in Azure costs and stuff. Okay. So essentially, you can also look at third-party tools that can give you options and things around optimization and stuff. So to answer your question, yeah. So the answer to that is yes. So whenever you're creating Azure policy, whenever you are assigning the policy, you always have the option to exclude certain resources. So if I show you maybe a sample policy assignment that I have over here in my environment, And if I go to that policy assignment, and if I go to edit the assignment, you see that there's always an option to add an exclusion. So what you can do is that you can maybe assign that to maybe the resource group, sorry, to the subscription or to the management group, and then say I want to exclude a particular resource group. So you see exclusions over here, and you can always exclude certain resources. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Sir David. Yeah, so thank you guys for joining this session. We do have a follow up, a second part of this governance tomorrow. So hopefully you guys can join us tomorrow again for another wonderful session from
Yeah.
lovely Sir David.
So we said something the other time. If you remember, Sarkozy, we said we wanted to do something where essentially it's going to be we just come, we have no agenda, we have nothing planned. People can just ask us questions.
Yeah.
So any questions that you have about Azure, so we'll pick a particular topic or something. Maybe it's on Azure Solutions Architect, but it's just going to be like an ask us anything session where you can sort of just ask any questions that you have. Maybe it's something that you're going through at work that you're thinking of a solution for. So my Sarkozy and myself are thinking of doing that. So if you're really interested, if you think that would be helpful to you, reach out to us, let us know, put some comments in the chat window, and then we can think of hosting something like that maybe once every 2 weeks or so.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, that would be great. Okay, so thanks very much for joining us. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you guys. Bye for now.